All right. Good morning, Jess. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy day to share your story with the listeners of the Meaning Project podcast. I know we talk a lot here in the theory of the psychology of meaning, how important it is to take difficult times, trauma, and to try to find a way to turn it into a positive if we can, into achievement, into for our own health, to turn it into something better. And I know your story is such a powerful one of doing just that. Would you want to start a little bit with talking about your story and the message you share?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. When I saw the title of your podcast, that was really exciting for me because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Finding purpose in life circumstances is what keeps us going. And I think there's so much wisdom to be gained from that. You know, they say smooth seas don't make a good sailor. So
So
this is how we learn. And so I'm not sure where exactly to begin without rambling. So if I start to ramble, go ahead and let me know. Uh, so I'll actually start at the beginning of why we're here,
Mhm.
and then maybe go backwards. I was assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein in 1991, and I am now working on a project that is kind of the accumulation of everything I've learned and every way that I've grown, every resource that I have experienced myself, and turned what I've learned about sexual violence, the lack of community, the lack of support, the lack of a safety plan ever in place, not just focusing on prevention, but discussing it ahead of time and having a safety plan. Everything I've learned about all of that has gone into this project, and this project. So I'm a speaker
Mhm.
on my story and this idea. I just did a TEDx talk, and but I've also created a workshop around it called Three Joannes Safer,
Mhm.
and it's named after the girl that I told the day after who believed me, and how community makes a difference, and how I learned about the community aspect of not only what is missing, but what is so desperately needed for survivors to heal successfully, overcome that trauma, and build resilience, is because I also happen to be from Newtown, Connecticut, where the Sandy Hook shooting happened, where I was teaching dance classes and worked with students that lost siblings, friends, kids they babysat, and was there for 5 years going through all of that, and then ended up working with one of the Sandy Hook families in that foundation for another 5 years. And that life experience of not only being surrounded by trauma, being confronted with my own trauma as it was triggered, but then working with parents who had experienced the most devastating of devastating tragedies, watching their grace and their healing and their processing and how they took it and turned it into incredible meaning and
Mhm.
purpose is what taught me that I needed to do the same thing. So I feel like all of those experiences brought me to where I am today. The other thing that's really fascinating and bizarre about my situation is that because I had so much repressed trauma, completely dissociated from childhood sexual abuse, and then the Epstein assault, I wasn't really confronted with all of it until Sandy Hook happened. And so I had access to incredible trauma therapy because therapists swarmed to our area to become resources, and some specialists were asked to come to our area. And so I was really lucky because the degree of healing that I have, I don't think is common, which is sad.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and it's the only reason I can be here talking about this. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I could barely speak any of it. And when I did, I would have about a 10-minute window, and then I would either get a headache or I would be weepy, and I'd fall asleep because my trauma responses are in the flight and freeze response mode. And so I would only be able to handle about 10 minutes of this conversation, and then I would be done. And so the fact that I'm even here talking about it, the fact that I was able to do a TED Talk, the fact that I'm able to be writing about all this now is a testament to how trauma therapy has changed. And now I'm able to turn this into purpose.
Right. If we look at that time, what an incredible story. And I know just in those few minutes, we just got the bits and pieces of 30 years of growth from 1991 when this incident happened, when quite honestly, our profession, my profession, didn't know a damn thing about treating trauma, right?
No,
And
no.
and if I think about those times as well, young ladies who came out about sexual assault were often turned into re-traumatized, victimized,
Yes.
right?
My
What was
generation. Yep, my
what?
generation. Uh and when I was 22 in 1991. So I'm a Gen Xer, right? So
Mhm.
1991, my understanding of rape at the time was it was based on how much you resisted. And when I sat and told my friend the next day a fraction of what happened, because I was too humiliated to tell her the whole thing. And the reason I was too humiliated to tell her the whole thing is because I froze. I froze. I was mute. I was like, wait, I don't want to be here doing this. Like, why can't I say anything? Why can't I do anything? And everything just got very foggy. And I could not, I was so brain foggy from all of
Mm,
it that even when I left, I walked out of there like nothing happened. I got on the subway going the wrong way.
mm,
And I was still, when I walked into work the next day, I was still mute. My friend asked me 3 times, well, hi, she's, hi, how you doing? And I wasn't responding the next day. And so she says, I tell her a fraction of what happened. She says, we need to go to the police. And I'm thinking, no one is going to believe me
right.
because I walked past that same doorman that had let me up into that penthouse as if
Nobody's
nothing
going
happened.
to believe you based on that definition that you said
Yep.
earlier, that the definition, and I believe that may have even been a legal definition back then.
I don't, I think it changed around that time, but because I was 22 and it wasn't necessarily following all the laws, I believe it was in the 80s that it was that definition. I don't know when it changed.
Okay.
It's not like the public is alerted to when they change these definitions.
Right.
And so, as far as I knew, it was my fault
Mm,
because I didn't resist. So it wasn't as even as if I believed I was innocent. I wouldn't have equated it as a sexual assault even 5 years ago because I thought I my in my brain and how my brain processed it was you're so stupid. You can't be trusted to take care of yourself. Look at what happened. Look at what you did. You were so stupid. And so the way I have described it is after I knew I wasn't going to go to the police and I thought nobody's going to believe me, it was as if my brain took that event and pulled it to the
mhm,
back of my thinking
mhm.
and put it in a vault, and then there was a sign on the door, and every time I would make a mistake, every tiny way I wasn't perfect, my brain would go back to the sign on that door that said you're stupid and here's why. And I didn't even remember what was behind that door,
Right.
but I just knew. I was like, oh yeah, 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 I'm so stupid. And I can't stress this enough, and this is where people don't understand what is stolen when people are sexually violated. I lost my self-trust. And when you lose your self-trust, the world becomes a very scary place.
Yeah.
An incredibly scary place because you can no longer trust yourself in how you choose relationships. You can no longer trust yourself on your career path. You can no longer trust yourself to take care of yourself. And then that becomes this whole domino effect where then the anxiety happens, then the brain fog happens, and then you are not reliable and trustworthy, and then you are making all of these errors. And so what you're believing, what they say internally is what's happening externally. It's an inward picture of an outward condition, or an outward picture of an inward condition.
Right. Right.
um that's what was happening. And I couldn't, it was like this weird paradox happening in my brain. And one of the things I have gained in healing is full capacity of my brain,
Mm.
and going, oh, I knew I was smart. I knew I was smart, but I had all this evidence to prove I was not.
Right. Right. Years of it. Years of it.
Years of it, over and over and over. And so every time I wasn't, and so there was this need to be perfect, this need to overproduce, this need to constantly overachieve to prove my worth. And that, ruins you in a million ways. On top of the nervous system just being overactive. And so Sandy Hook hits. Within a year, I have this whole physical breakdown. Like my whole body, my immune system, my digestive system, my cardiovascular system, uh, everything just starts to shut down.
Yeah. I don't think people realize enough the physical effects of long-term of it's not even long-term trauma of a traumatic event. It's long-term effects. Your example of that memory going, you say going back in a vault. I mean, the neuroscience of it is so accurate with that. Those traumatic memories, as we dissociate from them, are buried deep in our minds, but they are accessed, as you said, in stressful events. But
Mm-hmm.
like you demonstrated, we don't know why or how because our consciousness cannot deal with that event.
Yeah.
And so therefore these negative messages constantly come out. I, First of all, it's amazing that you're able to talk about it today. It truly is a testament to what that treatment was able to do for you. But I'm curious, before we talk about the healing, those years, you say Sandy Hook was a critical event in your healing, and I'd like to get to
Yeah.
that. But prior to that, what was life like after 1991 before you
Mhm.
realized what you had experienced? I mean, that had to have been truly tragic.
So in my TED Talk, I talk about this. My career was on this incredible trajectory. I actually started dancing very late in life, but I was a really natural. I was a natural dancer,
Mhm.
and so what most people would take 10 to 15 years to develop, I did in 3. And
Wow.
I got to New York City and I was auditioning, and when this had happened, I had already been a working professional dancer for a year and a half. I talk about how I had danced with MC Hammer, and like that night before, I was looking at my paycheck for working with Aretha Franklin. I was a backup dancer for Aretha Franklin. Like I was a a dynamic powerhouse, just getting
Wow.
into that dance scene and succeeding, like really
Yeah.
succeeding in an industry where it's very hard to succeed. And so that happened within 2 weeks. I broke out in this cystic like acne all over my face. Within 3 months, I was so overcome with anxiety and insomnia. And I mean, I remember I was in Tokyo, I was dancing, I had to come back to New York, and I remember telling a friend, I'm scared to go back, which even for me felt weird. I was like, why am I scared? I don't even understand, because I love New York City. I worked hard to get to New York City. I couldn't even connect to the thought of why I was afraid to go back to New York. It was pulled that far. I was just so scared to go back to New York. So I'm scared to go back. Insomnia was horrific. I'm walking around the streets just scared. So I had to leave. I actually had to leave. After all that work to get to New York City, I had to leave New York. I took a dance job in the dance world. I took what would be considered a very entry level dance job, like way in the opposite direction of my trajectory,
Mm.
and just to get away from New York because I was so scared. Um, Within 6 months, I'm shopping with a friend, and I'm trying on a pair of, we're at the Gap. I remember it like, so I'm trying on a pair of jeans, and it's a size 0 jeans, and I can pull them down off of my hips without unbuttoning them. And I laughed, my friend who's there, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this, how funny. And she turns to me and she goes, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that.
Wow.
And I was like, you're with me when I'm eating. You see me eating. I love food. I don't have an issue. That wasn't the issue. It was that my digestion was problematic. My nervous system was a wreck.
Right.
It was effect and I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, oh, I'm eating fine. I didn't connect all of that. Within a year of the assault, I had met someone I knew for just a couple of weeks. I'd had an injury, which again, this is my body falling apart. So my muscles are breaking down, my joints are breaking down. I end up having a back injury and I have to leave
Mm.
the show that I'm in, and I leave New York, leave I was in New Jersey. I leave New Jersey and I go to stay with family. I meet somebody that I knew for 2 weeks and I marry him because he wants to marry me. And and I think, but if I have a ring on my finger, I'll be safer. Not even a conscious thought, like not even like not a fully frontal thought, but in my brain I'm going, yeah, that's what I need.
The
I need a
survival
ring.
instinct, yeah.
Yeah, I need a ring on my finger. That's what I need. That's what'll keep me safe. And so it was a poor decision, not even recognizing, like, I mean, he was a great guy, like, but in my head I was like, yeah, 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 a ring will do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That'll be what does it. And so in relationships, I will tell you, obviously that one didn't work out, but
Can I
moving
ask, I am curious because my thought goes to anybody, you're able to explain why you were ready in 2 weeks, but anybody on the opposite side that wants to get married in 2 weeks might not always be as stable. So how long did that last?
So funny. We lived in the same state for a year, and then I knew I wanted to go. I was going to try to go back to New York. I moved back to New York, and we stayed together for another couple of years, and we're like kind of commuting between New York and Florida, and I thought that was normal.
Oh
And I
my
think
goodness.
the distance. So I had the ring on my finger when I back to New York, thinking I can do this now.
Hmm. It
Um,
was like your shield, like I have a
yeah,
ring and therefore I'm protected.
I'm not, I was cut off from any genuine intimacy.
Hmm.
I remember um, really struggled with any kind of confrontation. I really, or communicating any boundaries. So I had zero understanding of boundaries at all, friendships or relationships, or work, to the point where I took a job where I was dancing with torn muscles in my rib cage, which was extremely painful. And I'm doing all this acrobatic work, which is very bendy.
Hmm.
I kept doing it because they said, well, we don't have a sub. So I was in even like injuring myself thinking this is part of what I'm supposed to do. And that inability to um just take care of myself. And then I remember I met my who would become my future fiance. We didn't end up getting married, but a fiance that I had. And I remember thinking, well, if we're ever in a life or death situation, he'll know what to do. And I thought that was a great factor for choosing someone
Hmm.
because I could not trust my own judgment. So I was always looking for someone who could know more than I was, which meant I was constantly putting myself in the position of being subordinate to someone
Right.
else.
Right. Right.
So that dynamic was always there. And I think that's what people also don't realize about survivors. I hear a lot of flack to about the Epstein survivors, those teenage girls that even became adults, and them not understanding that dynamic of when your nervous system has been like this for a long time and you can't trust your own nervous system. You can only trust the circle that you've created for yourself to tell you what to do and keeping you safe. If
And you
that
can
makes
only be
sense.
hopeful that that circle, right? When you're in this unhealthy state of needing protection,
Yeah,
you can only hope that that circle is what you need. But sometimes I would guess choices made at that kind of intensity aren't always the
I
greatest
know.
circle.
The greatest, and the factors for choosing those people are
Right.
so inaccurate. They're
Right.
not for your best good, because you don't really choose factors that are healthy. You
Right.
don't choose
Right.
that list. You don't have a healthy list.
Yeah.
Or
Can I,
or or when you have a healthy list, you make that person fit into your list. So you're really selective in how you see it, because
sure.
then they fit into that list. Yeah.
So, what was it like for you as this case starts to break and all of these atrocities or begin to become public and he's imprisoned? What was that like for you?
Um, so I the the first time I saw his face in 30 years was I was just scrolling through my I just had a meeting. It was lunch, and it was the end of November. So it was right after Thanksgiving. Julie K.
Mm,
Brown had just written her masterpiece article of Perversion of Justice.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm scrolling through my phone and I see his face. So
Mm,
all I see is his face. And I'm like, wait, and I know that face. I didn't remember his name. I
mm,
just knew the face. And I knew that he was a bajillionaire. I knew that
right.
because I was assaulted in a penthouse in New York City.
Mhm,
So I'm looking at his face and I'm like, and then I see his name. And so I'm a journaler. I journal.
mhm.
And so when I was auditioning, I didn't often have time to journal as much as I wanted. So I saved all of my day planners from the 90s. So I go back and I'm like, I know this is him, but I don't even believe myself in all the feelings that are coming up. All the feelings are coming up. I'm hyperventilating. I think this is him. I think this, and I don't even believe myself then. I'm
Mm,
like, wait. But even though my body is reacting to his
yeah.
face, so I go back and I look through my day planners and I find 1991, and I find the exact day that I went to his penthouse. And I have the off I went to his office the week before, and then the weekend, so I met him twice. I had his office address. And then I the next week I went. When I called his office to make the second appointment, who I talked to, I had all that written down, and I was like and so I'm starting to remember, like it's starting to come.
Yeah.
And so my body's freaking out, even though I feel like my body knew more than my
Mhm.
cognitive thoughts did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my body's having reactions, like I'm struggling to breathe, I'm hyperventilating, I'm sweating, I'm weepy, and I reach out to my therapist and I tell her what happened, and I send her the article. And she said, don't read this article. So I go the whole night and I'm just weeping. And then I wake up the next day and I was like, no, I want to read that article. I want to find out, like, why he's there. Like, I didn't
Mhm,
even read, all I started was Perversion of Justice.
mhm.
I didn't read it. So I start reading the article. And the weirdest thing happened for me. I had no idea how much weight I was carrying. And so I'm reading and I'm reading these girls and I'm reading how he assaulted them, and I was like, "Oh my God, it wasn't my fault. I was not alone. I wasn't the only one that he did so, because I thought I was the only one." And even when I spoke to Special Agent Amanda Young and gave my FBI statement, I said, I thought I was the only one. That's why I didn't tell anybody. And she said, Jessica, it was designed that way.
And research, current treatment will tell us that's probably the single most important thing for a survivor to hear is it wasn't your fault. That never should have happened to you. And it
So
took nearly 25 years for you to hear that.
so the weird thing is that I was like, this weight lifted off of me that I had no idea I was carrying.
Mhm,
And it filled, like, this space that it filled was suddenly like this bit
mhm,
of confidence, like it wasn't my fault.
mhm,
I was wrong. I was wrong this whole time.
mhm.
So that was the first moment of me experiencing a bit of healing. But then there was a second moment that I think is really, really important. And if there was anything I could ever say to anybody listening to this, I didn't understand when we talk about trauma responses and we say it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It took multiple times from my therapist hearing this one thing for me to get it. She said, Jessica, it's automatic and involuntary. Like your body just does it. If that didn't click, she said to me, Jessica, when you put your hand on a hot stove, do you have to think about it for that hand to pop? No, you don't. You don't have to think about it. Your hand does it automatically. And then you go, oh, wow, that was hot. It's the exact same thing. It is that automatic. So even when people talk about fawn, which I hate that word,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, appease, faint, however you want to word that word where you go along with what happened. That's not a choice. That's a body responding. That is the primitive brain taking over and actually shutting down your ability to think. I did not understand any of that. Had no idea. Had no idea that I had no control of that part of my body. People don't understand that because they think, oh, but I had friends that were assaulted and they fought. That wasn't in their control either.
Right. Right.
It's like
It's a natural adrenaline response.
yeah, it is a natural adrenaline response. Exactly. If they fought, they didn't cognitively assess the situation and then choose to fight back. And that is the part, if there was anything I could get across to for partners of sexual assault survivors to understand, for family of sexual assault survivors, for sexual assault survivors to understand, like whether you fought, whether you ran, whether you froze, whether you fawned
Hmm.
to for your to save yourself, whether that flop is like I guess a part of freeze. Like I had
Hmm.
another sexual assault that happened later in my 20s and I almost passed out and I had no
Yes.
understanding of why that happened at all.
Yeah.
And so that would be the biggest thing I would want people to understand because that's where I believe this self blame comes in. Well, I couldn't do what someone else could do.
And yes, you're exactly right. In that adrenaline response, in that panic response, conscious thought is gone. So you cannot be conscious of, well, this is a situation where I would like to fight. No, the body reacts in one of those ways, and we are not in conscious control of it. It goes right back to that primitive brain. Our mind is so busy dissociating and trying to tell ourselves this isn't happening
Yes.
that our
Yeah,
body takes
that's
over.
there's a normalizing in like
Mhm.
in our like there's a normalizing of the predator,
Right. Mhm.
which then makes you question everything that's happening. And I will tell you, uh, when I was assaulted by Jeff Epstein, it wasn't this violent assault. It was a tiptoeing over the line and a tiptoeing over the line and a test and a test and a test to see how I would respond until the point where I was in fear. And I will tell you, he knew I was in fear. And that was part of what the desire was for him, like the control. And so
Mhm.
that's what people need to understand. It wasn't this violence, there wasn't a violent thing. It was a tiptoe, a tiptoe, a test, a test, a
Eh,
test, a normalizing, a slow normalizing.
right. And I would say that probably factors a lot into the self-blame because if it was
Yes,
violent, it would be obvious and you would walk
it would
away
be.
saying, I
Yep,
was assaulted. But
yep,
in that insidious and predatory manner of just,
yeah.
as you described, it's chilling. It really is chilling. So let's move from chill. Literally, I'm chilled for you. So, but I know
Yeah.
there is as we say, these terrible events, you chose to find a way, or you were chosen, I guess, right? Because it took other events in your life to bring you to this healing. Talk a bit about how being involved with the aftermath of Sandy Hook helped you to heal.
Mm. So it took me falling a lot farther down for me to realize how ill I was. And so there was a moment after the shooting, it was like 3 or 4 days later. And I just, there was a conversation that I was having. I was teaching kids that, you know, I was teaching dance classes and parents wanted things to be as normal as possible. So we're in dance classes with the kids, and as we would walk from studio to studio, the parents are talking about it. So it was we were all traumatized in different ways, and we
Mhm.
were all struggling in different ways, and people were getting it out in different ways. So the parents are in there talking about it
Yeah, yeah.
because so and so knew this mom's child was in there and they saw this happen, and so they're talking about all the traumatic
And
and
you're just catching bits and pieces
as I walk by, as I walk by,
as you're trying to protect children from
as
the
I'm trying
hearing
to
it.
walk in and be smiley with their
Oh
kids
my.
because they want that to be normal. But this is the first time they have a chance to get together and really talk. So it's like they needed that. And then we actually had to talk to like the student. We're like, can we please ask the parents to stop talking about this when we're walking through? But we were going right into Christmas break. So, but there was that night, it was like the Tuesday night afterwards, and I got in my car and I just like I literally heard and felt a snap, and I just lost it. Like I call it the moment I lost my shit. Like that
Mhm.
was it. Like there was a very distinct moment uh of a synapse happening, and when I looked back at that moment to reflect on it, I can frame it in one sentence. I had lost all hope in humanity's ability to take care of its children in that moment. And it was from there, that Tuesday in December of 2012, within 4 months, about the same thing started to happen. I just randomly lost 10 to 15 pounds. My immune system uh, shut down where I got a virus, and I was taking many rounds of antibiotics and other ways to heal and trying to heal myself. And I was stuck with this virus until January of 2014. And suddenly my body just stopped
So over a year of this degradation
shutting
of your
down. Yeah.
wow.
So I seemed, what I thought was that I was having a physical response to the trauma of Sandy Hook.
Mhm.
So I had been seeing some not more holistic doctors because I mean, general practitioners didn't understand what was happening. They're like, you're sick. You got a cold, and it's just a nasty cold, and it's sticking with you for a long time. And maybe it's because Epstein-Barr virus is stuck in you, and that's why it's keeping it going. Whatever, but no solutions, none. And my all my other body blood work looked fine, except that I'm bedridden at this point. Bedridden, teaching dance classes from a chair for
Mm.
3 months
Because you had a quote cold.
because yeah, but the
Wow.
fatigue was so great.
Mm.
I would have to take a nap after taking a shower. I couldn't. It got to a point where I couldn't stand up and digest food at the same time. If I ate a meal, my body would get so tired from eating the meal, I would have to lay down and I would fall asleep so my food could digest. And I got so scared. I remember being too tired to even cry. I was like laying on my pillow and the tears are falling out of my eyes on my pillow, and I'm panting because my heart rate is up, and I can't breathe. And I didn't know what was wrong. So the one thing that the holistic doctors would say, like, for example, if I have chiropractors, and applied kinesiology has always been something that worked for me, for my body. And I would have doctors say, whoa, your adrenal glands are really weak and they're really working overtime. Here, take this one supplement here, and that's going to cure everything. and, and they weren't wrong about what the problem was. They were wrong about saying this one thing is going to change everything. So I am sick for about 4 months. My body can't help. Like I'm either sleeping, eating, teaching class. That's it. That's all I do. And then I slowly get marginally better. And I keep trying to go plug on and on and on. And I would get to 2017, to May of 2017. Um, and my body starts to crash again. And it's happening fast. Like within a 2-week period, I go from feeling pretty normal to being bedridden again. And so I'm doing all of my own research. I'm looking online. What happens with adrenal glands? What could this be? And finally I find a doctor. He's a Western trained doctor that treats holistically. And I learn that I have severe, like if there are 4 stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3A, 3B, stage 4 is coma.
Hmm.
I'm in stage 3B of adrenal fatigue syndrome, where my body is just shutting down, organs are shutting down, my body's unable to process food, my body's unable to fight a virus, my body doesn't make muscle anymore. I go to get chiropractic adjustments, my adjustments aren't holding anymore. I'm allergic to everything, every single thing you put in my body. And my doctor, can I say his name?
Sure, if you like.
Okay, so Dr. Lamb,
Hmm.
it's Dr. Lamb coaching. He was somebody that
Hmm.
got adrenal fatigue as a Western doctor,
Hmm.
and found he couldn't get help in Western medicine. So he has began to study this issue himself until it became a whole family business. Now his wife is a dietitian, his kids are doctors, and they all focus on this issue because he believes that this is the illness of our generation,
Hmm.
that how our stress levels, like, so stress can cause adrenal fatigue and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what I have. And he said to me in 2017, he said, yeah, it's, this is not about Sandy Hook. You wouldn't be this sick from 5 years of trauma. And I was like, wait, no. He's like, something happened
Hmm.
in your 20s. And I said, I can't, no, I can't think of it. Like I couldn't remember.
So
And he goes,
even then, still not putting it together
still not
consciously.
putting it together.
Wow.
And so in 2017, I did not understand that what happened to me at 22 was a huge trigger for this illness uh, progressing. And my body fought like hell for 30 years. And then Sandy Hook happens. And it was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. And my body
Hmm.
said, no more. And
Yeah.
so from Sandy Hook to 2017, it took 5 more years. And I've now been working with Dr. Lamb since 2017. And I'm like so much better. It took about 2 years for me to get back to what I call normal-ish. And I still struggle because
Hmm.
I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. You know,
Hmm.
I still have triggers. And then I find out what was wrong in 2017, and all the Epstein stuff comes out in 2018. But I'm going to tell you something really interesting that you already know. I happened to live in Palm Beach County in 2006 when he went through the very first round. I'm sure do you know what I'm talking about? The 20 in 20
Hmm. Hmm.
2006, it was when he got the sweetheart deal. And I'm sure it was all over the papers while I lived there. But I was not resourced. His face probably came in front of me many times, but
Wow.
I couldn't, my brain did not process it at all,
Hmm.
at all.
I would wonder what your physical symptoms may have been back then.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't, I just, it was not something I was still I was struggling with my health.
Hmm.
Always. I had bronchitis for a year in 2003 to 2004. I was struggling in a lot with fatigue always, anxiety always, insomnia always, uh, hypoglycemia symptoms constantly up and down. And so what I find so interesting is that I was resourced. I had now been working with a therapist, and I felt safer. And so when I saw his face this time, it was as if I was able to see it because I was already feeling safe enough to see
Right.
it
That's what I was just going to say. There was true safety there somewhere in your life that you were
somewhere.
able
I
to
had
experience
some,
it.
yep, yep, because I really didn't start genuine trauma therapy until right after Parkland when I was really struggling.
Okay. And when you say genuine trauma therapy, anything in particular that you found really helpful?
Yeah, I feel like if therapists understood trauma more,
Yeah.
um, I will tell you all I needed was validation for what I was going through. Just validation that I wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
That when I said something like, I feel like my body is not making muscle anymore. I'm sensing that. I feel like I'm not able to digest food anymore. I feel like when I get happy, I get all excited and I crash exactly the same way I crash when I have bad news because it's all adrenaline. And that's when I first learned that stress is stress is stress is stress. So I'm a professional dancer. That's stress. The body doesn't discern between physical stress, me eating foods that I'm allergic to. It doesn't discern between me getting happy news and the adrenaline running through my body and being so excited, and then I crash as if it's trauma. So I found that really fascinating, and it took somebody that understood in intense levels of trauma to be able to repeat back to me and validate my experience, to then improve my own psychoeducation, to then make me not afraid to start reading all the books
Mm.
and learning what this is that's happening in my body, like it's some monster inside me, for it to for the mystery of it, the the danger of it happening inside me to just dissipate into nothing and recognize, oh, this is normal. This is so normal. It's normal. When I learned that, when I first started to try to do my speaking and write, what am I going to write about? I might have to write out this experience. Or when I was writing my impact statement, and it was so painful to do, and I would fall asleep. She said, "Oh yeah, that's your freeze response. That's your body shutting down. That's normal. Of course you're shutting down." And
Right.
so building my window of tolerance is the work
Hmm.
that I've been doing.
Hmm. That's amazing. And just to think, something so simple as no, simple but hard to do, validation, reminding you that no, this is natural and normal, and it's your body shutting down, your body reacting to it could be so helpful for you.
So it was life changing for me.
Wow.
That was it. And that's why the trauma. So me sitting and just talking about the event would not have worked for me.
Right, right. Probably would
Never.
have made things worse.
It would have made things worse. Somebody not understanding how trauma was impacting how I was viewing it.
Hmm.
The biggest reframing that my therapist would do would be like, well, of course you're feeling that way. Da da
Hmm.
da da da. And she would just give me the tiny bit of trauma education. Well, of course that happened. Da 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 da. This is what's happening in your body. Of course that happened. This is what's happening in your nervous system. Of course that happened. This is what's happening. It's because this part of your brain. So it was just these gentle, tiny nuggets that said, this is what's happening in your body and your brain.
Hmm. Hmm. And that you're
Not
not
just
abnormal.
yeah, and it's not your
Mm.
thinking. Your thinking isn't messed up.
Right,
It's
right.
it's it's your thinking is responding to what's happening in your body.
Sounds like you had an amazing therapist.
An amazing therapist, life
Good.
changing, life
Can I
changing.
ask what were one or two of your top when you said you started reading all of the books? What were the
Mm.
ones you want people to know about and read?
I'm going to tell you about one that not a lot of people have heard of, but it
Hmm.
was really a game changer for me. It is Peter Walker,
Hmm.
and it is Surviving to Thriving Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder.
Okay.
And I'm gonna see if I can. I'll send you the cover. But what I liked most about it is that when you start to look at all of the different ways, and this is what he does really well, is he breaks down all of the different trauma responses and what a healthy trauma response looks like,
Mhm.
rather than an unhealthy one, like a learned one, like or a habitual one that our brains can go into, and how that again, it just validated why. It also validated for me that you can have multiple trauma responses happening all at the same time. It's not like you fall into one camp. So I could totally understand that part of my dissociation was my hyper overfunctioning.
Mhm.
And at the same time, the way I'd be unable to communicate my needs, which fell into the fawning response, to the freeze response when I would be so flooded by emotions, I couldn't get out of bed. And I
Mm.
just thought, the secrecy around all that, like, I have so many people tell me, they're like, Jessica, I had no idea you were struggling. And I just kept thinking, that's exactly the way I wanted you to. And
Exactly.
nobody saw the days that I couldn't get out of bed.
Mm.
Nobody saw the days where I struggled to, I remember at one point when I was really, really sick, where the only way I could feel good about myself was I had to start counting the number. I did 3 things today. I made my breakfast. I took a shower. That I had to count the number of things that I could
Yeah.
do.
And
And that was
many
like
of those things.
yeah, like I had to just and be like, I did 3 things
Yeah.
today. Like
And just basic survival, right? Living things, showering and
just
eating.
yeah, yeah,
My goodness.
yeah. And
Well,
being
let's,
okay with that.
yeah, yeah. Normalizing it. Let's talk a little bit. I know your platform is educating people on how to prevent, how to avoid those years of what happened to you. The idea that we will encounter difficult event, we will encounter trauma in our lives. Hopefully we can prevent it. But if not, talk a little bit about your message there.
Thank you very much. So when I decided that I was going to go into speaking and I wanted to figure out where was the moment that I wish something had changed.
Hmm.
And it was that moment that I had internalized it and blamed myself, that one moment. And it was when I turned away from my friend who was actually being quite supportive. Uh, and didn't even talk to her again for almost 30 years. Like that's how badly I was so humiliated by even telling her what happened. Even though she was supportive, I blamed myself so dramatically that I didn't speak to her again. Dear friend, we've since reconnected. It's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. So I started looking at what did I want to change, and I literally want to change that one moment. I want to change the moment where we internalize all of that shame. We misunderstand what happened in our body. We misunderstand how we ended up in that situation because unfortunately we're not just misunderstanding it because we are misunderstanding it. That's what society is saying. It's we're getting our self blame mirrored back to us. It's not as if it's made up. And so what I want everyone to think about, whether you're a supporter or a survivor, is that um, we we're often left alone in this to figure it out for ourselves, and we're expected to handle it in any way. And there's not any other trauma or tragedy, especially one of this volume, that is ever treated that way. So, for example, after Sandy Hook, we have active shooter drills in every single school in the country. We looked at the problem and we said, okay, we have to try to prevent this. But not only do we learn from trauma and tragedy, but we have to find a way, a safety strategy that minimizes the harm if it happens if it happens,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's gonna happen again. So how do we minimize the harm?
Hmm.
We do that with mass shootings. We do it with cars. So with cars, we learned how to prevent car accidents. We have all of these different ways we prevent car accidents. We have, driver's license. We have traffic laws. We have seat belts and car seats, right?
Hmm.
But seatbelts and car seats don't prevent a car accident. They're actually a safety strategy to minimize damage. And so in every situation, we have the prevention, but
Hmm.
then we have a safety strategy that's like, okay, since this is going to happen, how do we prevent the damage? We do it with fire. We teach 5-year-olds to stop, drop, and roll.
Hmm.
We teach kids not to play with matches. Not to play with matches is the prevention. If you happen to catch on fire, little 5-year-old, please stop, drop, and roll. We're okay teaching a child. They're not too. It's not too traumatizing to teach a child that if they catch on fire, to stop, drop, and roll. So in every arena of tragedy and trauma. We have prevention and we have safety strategy, except this one. No one wants to talk about how do we give children, teenagers, college students, adults, safety strategies that are appropriate for their age to help them minimize the damage. Parents,
Mhm.
how do we teach them to teach children what to do, how to respond? How do we teach parents how to respond if this were to happen to their child so that it minimizes the damage?
Mhm.
It's this whole area of our society. In fact, yes, we have a national hotline that you can call right now. Anybody can call right now. And what that requires of me as a victim of a sexual assault is I've got to go outside my community to strangers
Right.
all by myself after I've been traumatized and get help.
Yeah.
Even if in bystander training, they would expect someone like something's happening in the community that you're like, oh, I got to stand up. You've got to go against everything that's happening in the community in that moment and be the really extraordinary hero and
Mhm.
stand up against your friends, your colleagues, everyone around you, and be that exceptional person. So the way we want to change that is with a community solution. Uh, so it's an easy three-part thing. We say there's people, meaning we choose people, and we talk about why we need community. And I learned that from Sandy Hook. We got so much support, and when I compare it, even the support we got after Sandy Hook, I mean, globally, people mourned with
Mhm.
us. For better, for worse. Some of it was a little weird, but and creepy. But regardless, we people mourned with our community. No one does that with sexual assault. No one. And so we believe that if we can in advance choose some people that we can trust in a crisis, pick 3 people you can choose in a crisis. And then you sit down and you go, okay, well, where are the hospitals with forensic nurse examiners? Because not all hospitals have them. And so you want to know where that is. You want to know all of the details, all of the resources. Did you know that in some states there are 3 different versions of a rape kit that you can do? You don't, it's not always giving your name. Sometimes in some states they allow you to give an anonymous rape kit so that it can be submitted and you're only contacted if something happens with it. So you don't have to give your name. So there's all of this information out there that no one knows just about the logistics of what
Mhm.
happens. You don't always have to report to police to get support. You can, I firmly believe in filing civil lawsuits about this because people don't understand the damage and the amount of money. No one understands how much lifetime income has been lost. 30
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
Medical bills, over time. What happens in long-term trauma affects me financially significantly.
Right. Right.
Significantly. I'm nowhere near where my peers are
Mhm.
at my
Mhm.
age. So, like, there are many, many concrete, simple resources, options, healing modalities that can be discussed ahead of time so that that small little group of 4 know what are my choices. But then 3 is really important. It's the pact that you make with those other people. Early, as a trauma specialist, that early intervention is really important. It's not the end all be all. I was able to heal after 30 years, but ideally, we never want anybody to go through what I went through.
Not for
So,
30 years. Yeah.
not for 30 years. But this is what I believe from everything I've read and understand, and I might be wrong. But if we can have people reach out to their safe, supportive, trustworthy community, they can make a pact that I'm going to reach out to you within 24 to 48 hours. You're going to respond within that 24 to 48 hours. Then I have 3 people reflecting back my innocence, not my
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah.
So I calm my nervous system down. My body resets because I'm surrounded in safety. surrounded in safety. Even if I'm, because that's the other thing is people think because I'm able to talk to you about it or tell you about it right now, that doesn't mean I'm not in an unsafe moment. I may be away from the human with the sexual predatory behaviors, but I can still be sitting in a very unsafe moment. And that's part of that trauma informed understanding. Basic trauma, sexual assault first aid, trauma informed sexual assault first aid is one of the skills that we want to teach within this. But this is the other thing, because that person, it's hard to even say the words of what happened. So we don't even ask you to do that. We ask you to come up with a secret emoji. So I talk about like a red balloon. So if you're on my team, you're one of my three J's, three Joannes, I say Johns, it could be three J's, three humans. Maybe we agree that I'm going to send out a red balloon. And that's all I have to do. And you're going to be there for me without question within those 24 to 48 hours, and our plan goes into action. But this is the kicker. So I believe that if we start doing this on community levels, meaning we're starting in sororities, because that's a no-brainer. We're starting sororities. But obviously, I want this to grow to humanity. If humans with predatory sexual behavior discover that we're no longer quiet, we're no longer uncomfortable talking about this topic, is not too difficult for us to talk about, this topic is not too heavy for us, we know exactly what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, and where we're going to do it, if this happens, when they start to learn that our communities are listening now with a plan, I believe that's going to be the deterrent to sexual harm that we've all been waiting for. So it's kind of going in the prevention direction, but through a safety strategy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's just an amazing way to look at it. Is in having that safety strategy, you educate people and build a community that fights this, that prevents it.
Yeah. In the simplest container.
Yeah.
The simplest container that can make the difference between someone sitting in shame and isolation and secrecy and self-blame to actually being able to overcome the trauma, build that resilience, and heal successfully.
Jess, you are amazing. Your story is so sad and chilling, but to be able to take that sad and chilling story and to turn it into this global initiative, I'm so happy to have gotten this opportunity to chat with you and to
Thank you.
know you and your message. For anybody that wants to find out more, to have you speak, to learn more about this message, where can they find out more about you?
They can go right to my website, and that
Mhm.
is jessmichaelsspeaks.com. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on, for caring about this, for caring about finding meaning in this, because this is how we overcome, and this is how we heal, and this is how we make a difference. So I'm really honored to be here.
Well, it was my pleasure chatting with you. Again, thank you so much. We'll make sure we have all of that information. Can we share Dr. Lamb's information as well?
Yes, Dr. Lamb Coaching, and it's Lamb, Lam,
Okay.
drlambcoaching.com. I cannot stress how knowledgeable I have found them to be over the
Mhm.
long term that I've been with them,
Mhm.
of really every single reaction in the body. So yeah, he believes this is the illness of our generation.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. We will make sure his information is in there and his
Thank
family's
you.
information. So, again, thank you so much. It was an honor to chat with you. Please keep doing the good work you're doing, because we definitely need it out there.
Thank you.
Take care.